everyone. Welcome back. Alex Goldman here from the stands, joined very luckily this morning by someone who I think is a very exciting prospect here on the Australian scene, Alfred Stoddart. Alfred, how you doing this morning, man?
I'm doing well. Just came back from Wollongong Wars. A few of my teammates fought by and saying hi to some guys.
Oh
It's
yeah,
good
yeah.
times.
Everyone get out healthy. Good fight card.
Yeah. My teammates got out healthy. The two guys who broke their arms getting slammed didn't get out too healthy. That was
Well, I mean, hey, price we pay every now and again. But glad to hear that your teammates at least got out healthy and that they got the victory. So we're off to a good start. But
no, they didn't, they managed to. They unfortunately didn't get the victory. Each fight
oh, sorry to
was
hear.
close by. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
still, it's a learning experience. It's the amateurs at the moment, so it's
yeah,
all about.
yeah. Exactly, exactly. And, that kind of leads into my first question, which is, I want you to take me back to, when you were first starting as an amateur, your first day starting mixed martial arts. Sort of walk me through your experience of when you first got introduced to MMA.
My first got introduced to MMA. I was what was it? I was actually just at home because I've always had a fascination with martial arts. I've trained somewhat since
Mm,
I was a kid. Like loved like kung fu movies and all that stuff. And then after high school, I was looking at possible career paths and stuff to do, and just wanted something to do in the meantime. And I started training on my own, and I stumbled into the UFC and watching the UFC, and it was everything I'd ever been looking for. I just hadn't realized it was a thing yet, and it was multiple martial arts all going through and seeing what actually works versus what is woo for the most part.
yeah.
And yeah, that's when I first got introduced into it, and then I walked into SVG Australia as I was doing college. I was just about to finish one of my diplomas for game art, for 3D game art, and
Yeah.
Ben Powell, the head coach there, I started training. I already had a bit of a striking background because of the self training a fair bit, and then the jiu-jitsu all came in from training with him, and it kind of snowballed just off of consistency, really, just
Mm,
training as much as I possibly can. And then it's like, okay, you've trained a lot of jiu-jitsu, you're pretty good. One of the coaches, like Dan DeJesus, is like, you should compete. And I was like, okay, I guess I will. I've never competed or fought a person in my entire life at that point.
mm,
So I'm like 23 and literally never fought even a person in like school or anything. And I'm like, okay, I'll jump into it if you, because I trust my coaches. If they wouldn't blow smoke up my ass, if they're saying I should compete, they're probably seeing there's something there. I went there, I competed my first comp. My division ended up, the two people who were there ended up pulling out because they had separated the gi division and the no gi division, and
mm.
both the guys in the gi division the day before and got injured. So I ended up being bumped up as a complete white belt. I got bumped up to blue belt plus 230 pounds in weight. So really big blue belts, way more experienced. And I was like, well, I'm going to get killed. This is a terrible idea. I don't know why he
Yeah.
told me to compete. He never told me I did. And then I did well. I choked out one guy immediately. And then the second guy I kind of did well with, and eventually he caught me because like severe amount of experience,
Yeah.
training for like 3 months at that point, and he was a pretty well-rounded blue belt. And from that point on, I was hooked with just competing. I competed a lot more jiu-jitsu. I did some kickboxing matches as well. And then I always knew for a fact the moment I started competing in any of them, the goal was to have an MMA fight.
Mm,
Whether I would like the MMA fight from that point on was like here or there, but it's the way I do everything. Like when I'm doing my game design courses, I'm building it because I want to be a specific type of game designer and game artist. So
mm.
every assessment I do leans to that. When I was training, I was doing every time I did jiu-jitsu comp, it may have not been the right way to win the most amount of medals, but I wanted to be a submission artist and
Mm.
attack submissions, play MMA based jiu-jitsu, regardless of what the result it would get me on when you go into a comp, which is a hard thing to do when it comes to like getting rid of your ego. Because especially in a full force competition, you're still being like, I need to make this as practical as I can if someone could punch me in the face. I
Yeah.
want to finish fights. I want to finish them often. And it showed out in my jiu-jitsu record. I've got like over 50 matches, 40, like I most of them all by submission. And I think I only have won two matches by decision and walkover
Mm,
ever out of all those 40. Everything is a submission. Even when I'm in mount, up by 1 point, and if he sweeps me, he wins. I'm still looking for the submission and making it a point for that. And then same thing I did in the kickboxing matches. I didn't go full Muay Thai stance and everything. I had to stand in a bit of an MMA stance, work my distance, and it was all building through there. So by the time I got to my first MMA fight, I was comfortable and it felt good. And then once I actually did the fight, I was completely addicted at that point. I was like, I know exactly what I want to do and what I want to keep doing. I didn't know if I wanted to make a career out of it till I got deep into my amateurs, and then that was the point where it's like I treat it like that. If I go and if I keep doing it and I keep doing it, then I'm not delusional enough to go like I want to be an MMA fighter after my first one. I'm like, let me see if I get the results. If I lose 5 fights in a row by knockout and I clearly have no talent for this, as much as I might love it, I'm going to be smart enough to go. I'm not good at this. Apparently, pretty good at MMA and punching people in the face. So I was like, great, I'll keep doing this. I'll be a great amateur. Then I won a belt as an amateur, and I was like, maybe I could do this as a pro. And then I won some pro matches. I was like, oh, maybe I can make the UFC. So now my goal is the UFC. And if I make it to the UFC and I beat a bunch of people there, then my goal is going to shift to maybe I need to become the best and win the belt there. So it's all
Yeah.
merit based.
Yeah.
What's up, guys? It's Josh here from the stands. And look, I know you're in the middle of a good little interview that we're currently doing, but I want to take a second of your time just to give a quick little shout out to today's sponsor, TrainAid. Obviously, they're big supporters of us, like we are of them. And today they're sponsoring this video. And look, I want to let you guys know about a little product they do. Their premium product, TrainAid Hydration. It's the best hydration formula on the market, guys. I'm not gonna lie to you. And look, if you don't believe me, ask guys like Israel Adesanya, Alexander Volkanovski, Leon Edwards. You ever heard of these guys? I mean, they're the top athletes in the world. And they're all taking TrainAid Hydration. It really is the #1 formula in the world for hydration. And in the summer months here in Australia, I mean, it's something that I think everyone should be taking. And TrainAid have been very nice to give us a discount code, a very healthy discount code as well. I mean, it's a nice little discount code. If you use the code FTS15 at the checkout, they will give you 15% off. We'll leave a link to their website in this description of this video. And yeah, check them out, guys. Please support them because they are supporting us. Cheers.
For sure. And, something I want to touch on is, you seem to be very honest in how you assess your performances in the cage, as well as just sort of how you assess yourself. And, I'm curious, is that sort of a part of you that's always been there, this sort of honest self-critic of yourself, or is it something that you had to develop through martial arts? Because one thing I found, just with either martial artists I train with or martial artists that I've interviewed, that we're often our harshest self-critics in martial arts. Martial artists can be very self-critical, but you seem to be very honest in how you assess yourself. So is that something you developed, or you've just always had it?
Yeah, I think it's from both martial. I mean, two very self-critical fields in the sense that I work as an artist. I'm a 3D artist by
Yeah,
trade. I work on 3D art. So that's you're taught is like, well, accept criticism. There's gonna be people telling you your work is shit, and you need to know why it's shit. And
yeah,
then so you also get the imposter syndrome of just being an artist. You
of
never think you're
course.
good enough. Then
Yeah,
comes the martial arts side where you never think you're good enough. You always
yeah,
think you're shit, and there's always someone being like, your elbow could have been a little bit off to the side. You could have finished that better. So it's after a while you have to develop that like practical application of like, okay, where am I at actually? And I think it's because I never came into martial arts so young that I got delusional
mm,
in the point that I'm just like, I'm the killer man. Blah, blah. It's like I came in, I didn't expect to be in a martial art in the MMA career. Like
mm,
I was even when I was gonna compete, I was like, oh, I'm gonna compete a few times because it's this sport I love, but I'm too old for it. No,
mm,
I haven't been competing. There's younger guys here. This thing has left me behind. I'm just going to train and compete for the sake of my competing, and I'll win some, lose some. So I came in as a normal person without any hiccups. It would be
yeah,
literally the equivalent of someone coming in off the couch and then training a lot of and then fighting, because that's literally
yeah,
what I did. For most
yeah,
of like 4 years before I started training, I left the house for like maybe 50 days combined. I was on the couch playing video games, occasionally training in the back with a heavy bag. and then I decided I got off the couch and started training MMA. So I came in fully expecting like I will be shit at this, and if I'm good at it, I can see where I'm good at it. And
Mm,
being self-critical, it fit very well with my coach Ben Powell because he's like, whenever we win fights, we do a sit down the day after and we talk about like, okay, we dominate even this fight, where the most recent fight, super dominant, etc., etc. But the first thing we talked about after the like happy high had worn off was your hand dropped here, your chin was up here, your punch selection here, your submission here. This is what we're gonna fix. This is, and I'm right there with him because my brain is already like that. So it's good to have someone else who's just like that, who's like, let's make sure these details are tight. And I think like I've been mulling this over for a little bit. I think we've kind of messed up athletics a little bit because remember back in the day, if someone was going from the lower league to the higher league, they were given at least a few years to
mm,
adapt to that league.
yeah.
Like Tom Brady didn't go from like high school or like college
Mm,
to the NFL and was immediately great. Like Michael Jordan lost for 9 years,
yeah.
etc., etc. But the expectation was like, oh no, he's a bum, he's never going to win. It was like, no, he's building towards his body. Whereas
Mm,
now in most sports in general, you're expected to come in and be clean immediately. If you're
mm,
an amateur going into the pros, if you don't win 6 fights in a row, you're a waste of talent. You're done now. You weren't ever actually that good.
mm,
You're a hype train. When in reality, it's like it's a significant step up and it takes time. That's why I'm pretty honest. You see it after my fights. I was like, yeah, I messed up here. I messed up there. I'm doing this. I'm going to win. I always tell people I'm going to win some and I'm going to lose some because I don't want to set an unrealistic expectation that I'm there yet. I'll tell them
mm,
when I'm there yet. When I'm like, hey, I don't think I can possibly lose a fight ever again. And people will hear about it from me immediately. But I know there's shit I don't know. And
yeah.
there's people who can catch me there and who can do something. And that's the point. That I've only been a pro at MMA for less than 12 months now.
Yeah.
But people are setting the expectation, which is great because it means my work has been put out there. The expectation that I'm a well-rounded, high-level pro, and they're putting me up there with guys who've been pros for 10 years. And
Yeah.
I'm like, that's great, and I love the compliment. But also, I always want to taper that down and be like, don't forget, I've only been at this
Mm,
for less than 12 months.
yeah.
Like, when I'm at this, if I'm this close to them in your eyes right now, let me get to 5 years. Don't write me
Mm,
off quite yet. Let me get to 5 years in this sport. I guarantee you the potential you see is going to be like really done because I'm trying to do it the old school way. I know I want to learn as much as I can. I don't want to just
mm,
because in my mind I started off most of my first 4 fights in amateurs. I was wrestling. I took people down. I submitted them or I dominated them like with my grappling and stuff. And then I realized my striking is not where it should be. And then I worked on my striking for a little bit, lost a fight, won a bunch of fights with the striking, and took really tough fights where it's like, oh, you're a really good grappler. You probably shouldn't strike with a really high level striker. It was like 5-0, 5-1 at the time. And this is like Christian Appam. And I was like, well, no, I need to take that challenge because he is like lights out of high level striker. And if I don't strike with him, I'll never get the confidence that I can. And you can only wrestle for so long.
yeah. No, for sure.
So I
And
have to work on skills.
yeah, and I think it's a really important point that you say about like getting used to the level. One fighter I always kind of point to, Max Holloway. His first 4 fights in the UFC, he went 2-2. Again, he was young, getting used to the level, took his time. Now well, not arguably, he's a legend of the sport, arguably the greatest featherweight of all time, arguably one of the best, fighters to ever sort of go through the UFC in terms of fan friendly style. And I think, as you say, so many people nowadays, you have to be a pro, 6-0, all finishes, immediately go to the UFC and then fight, someone in the top 15. And what we're seeing is we just see so much of this young talent that's coming up and going through, just getting crushed in the UFC. And it's so hard for them to build back up to that level. So, I definitely think there's something to be said for, doing it the old school way, as you say. And, something you've done that is old school is, you've fought for Shruikan, you've fought for Beatdown, you've fought for Eternal, you've fought for all these different organizations, which is, a real sort of old school mentality as opposed to just picking one. Is that something that you've done deliberately where you wanted to fight for all these different organizations to get a different feel, get as much experience as you can, or is it just really opportunities have popped up in all these individual promotions?
Yeah, at first it was I just needed to find a fight and find a
Mm.
fight wherever I could. And then I think after the first time I went to international into state and I went fight on demolition, I realized the importance of, oh wow, this is a thing. The travel is a thing. Getting used to the travel and then fighting is a thing. And then I realized like there's a whole you can fight in your home state and become like 13-0, and you can completely shit the bed the moment you're told to fly to Korea to fight
Yep.
because you haven't built that. It's all a skill, and I realized a lot. It's like MMA in general. You have to practice every single thing. There's nothing you're just gonna pick up. So if you don't like fly over interstate, fly international, and get that skill and learn to like, okay, this is how I need to find where my food is, get my scale, do this, this, and this, and you kind of rely on other people to tell you. If you don't like I think my second interstate fight was Christian or one of my first. I got there and I messed up the rehydration because made weight the same way I usually do. I got there, got a scale, got my sauna blanket. I was like, this is great. And then I was like, oh, I want to eat now. What do I want to eat? And I yeah, it was Christian. I googled something in Gold Coast. It was for Eternal, and I was like, "Oh, I'll go up to Gold Coast, like town, and go buy something there." Meanwhile, there's food at the venue, but I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I'll just go eat there. It'll only take like 30 minutes." I got there; they were closed for the midway, and I was like, I ended up walking around and kind of sightseeing a bit too much, and I ate eventually, but it wasn't as structured as it should have been. That taught me again, like the rehydration is a massive structured progress. You don't People kind of give up after they make weight. They're like, hard work is done. Now I just get to eat and drink. Like, no, the hardest part has now started, which
Mm.
is you have to be extreme. You want to eat as much as you can and anything you can. But now you have to be as extremely meticulous about what you eat, when you eat it, what time you eat it. Getting a nutritionist really helps. I'm working with Strive dietitians, and that like you have to take it seriously. And then when you fly somewhere, you also have to work on that even in a different aspect because you're now having to go from a hotel to a hotel, from a hotel to a restaurant, and then figuring out food, and then the boredom comes of just yeah, it is actually a skill, and I ended up doing that on purpose. I look for fights everywhere. I'm willing to go fight people in their backyards all the time because it also helps me learn like, oh, I can go fight someone in the backyard. This will never affect me. It doesn't
Yeah.
bother me. They've had home crowd advantage for my last 7 fights. This is the first time I fought in Sydney in 2 years was recently, and every other time I'm fighting everywhere else, and it's money to me. It's fine now.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And one thing I want to ask you, and you kind of touched on it earlier, was you talked about how you're not necessarily putting this expectation on yourself that at your level now that you have to be the best in the world and that you should be able to beat everyone in the UFC right now. So, I'm curious, does sort of not putting that level of pressure on yourself to, be the best in the world today, does that make it easier for you to compete? Because, something that, as I'm sure you would know, that can happen, particularly with amateurs and early pros, is they can put so much pressure on themselves that when they go out to compete, they kind of freeze. So I'm curious, does it make it easier for you to compete, not necessarily having that sort of internal pressure on yourself?
Oh, 100%. It's always holding that thing in my head of like, dude, I'm just a guy who played video games. Now I'm fighting people. I won't be able to fight people forever. That's a guarantee.
Mm,
This fun thing I'm doing is gonna go.
mm,
So it's like the pressure of it is like I had that pressure on me. I'd say my two losses as a pro came from that pressure coming from different places
mhm.
that I hadn't shown up yet. Which is like that's what I'm saying. Like I'm maturating to the pro level because there's shit that I didn't expect to get to me. I thought I'd after the Darcy Vendy fight and I fought Sam Dobbin and Conor Woodman and I
Yeah.
won those two fights. I thought I figured it out. In my head, I was like, none of this matters. The people don't matter. The media doesn't matter. No one matters. It's just me and this dude in the cage, and the technique will wear out, and that's all we care about. That's it. And I was lighting people up and like really finding myself there. And then I got some management now, and we're good. And I was getting sponsorships. I was getting these opportunities, and all of a sudden, like right before the fight was about to happen, I was like lined up for this is the fight with Nick Keppel. I was
Yeah.
lined up and I was ready. And all of a sudden, this one little thought just trickled in. It's like, yeah, now you have all these companies depending on you. It's not just you're just showing up to your gym and train, and now you're gonna fight and then go home. There's people depending on you, and I was like, whoa, this is weird. And it was funny because usually things don't affect me, but in that moment, I had like threw a shot. I saw him hurt, and usually when I hurt someone after two shots, I back up, I do something, and I
Mm.
was like, it's hurt. This will be a great highlight for everyone. Like
Yeah.
and it was also like the news coming out before the fight was the two biggest anticipated fighters. So all of a sudden now everyone else is saying like, I'm at that level. I'm going to be the next one up, or blah 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 blah, biggest middleweight fight, blah blah blah. And I'm like, it'll be great if I knock him out right now, 30 seconds, submit my place. But that's never me. I never came into the game thinking I'm that guy. I was always assessing the thing that's happening in front of me
Yeah.
as quickly as I could, and also keep myself safe as much as possible. Keep myself safe and assess what's there and respond. And for a moment, I gave that up just so I could be like, for shit that wasn't real. It was on the outside, and I got called for it. And I learned that lesson immediately because the very next fight, guy who has 8 finishes straight, dominant fighter, knocking people out, submitting them, hit me as hard as he could, didn't put me down. And I was safe and I defended shots. And I was like, there's lessons to be learned. And I know I didn't expect that to ever be a thing. Like my head was like, I'm bulletproof now. I
Mm.
figured out the mental side of this game. I'm done. And then that kicked in. I was like, oh, there's a bunch of other pro things that I probably haven't even possibly thought of that the other pros have already gone through that it's gonna hit me. And there might be things like that. The goal is hopefully to get opponents that the mistake that I might make won't cost me as much.
Yeah.
Like I think I've been fighting pros who've been pros for years, for the most part. So they felt this already and they dealt with it, but they fought other people at their level. So maybe they ate a left hook or a right cross, but it wasn't as hard because they were like that and they recovered. Whereas if you're fighting someone at a higher level than you, the margin of error is so much smaller because they know how
Yeah.
to finish make that mistake because they've made it and they've fought people who made it before and maybe they didn't finish them, but they knew they could. And now I'm making that mistake completely blind. They'll see it coming from a mile away and they know how to finish you from that mistake.
Mm.
And that's kind of now where my mind has gone. It's gone. I started managing my career a little bit better when it comes to picking matchups. I'm always want to fight anyone and everyone.
Yeah.
And if I get really like, if I can't find a matchup, I will for sure call out someone with 17 fights. I don't give a fuck. But like, for my part, I'm like, I know what it means to call out someone and fight someone at that highest level. It means they cannot be, the margin of error for my fighting needs to be significantly smaller.
Yeah, definitely. Alfred, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. I think this is actually a very good conversation for a lot of young fighters to listen to. Because again, I said it earlier, how you break things down, how you assess the game, and I think how you assess yourself as well is just it's so honest and refreshing. And I think for young fighters, it's a really good one to listen to. We really appreciate you giving us some time today, man. Wishing you all the best, and I'm confident that we'll see you in the UFC in the future. All the best,
Yeah,
Alfred.
100%. One more thing though, I will say this because I'm seeing a lot of amateurs not fighting. Like you said, they put a lot of pressure on themselves. They invite friends, family, the whole world. Guys, it's an amateur fight. No one cares. Like when you go, as someone who literally was an amateur last year and went pro, by the time you go pro, you can go up to any promoter and be like, I'm 5-0 with 16 championships, etc., etc. And they will say $500 because
Yep.
you're 0-0 fighter off the street. They do
Hmm.
not care. The
Yep.
amateurs are about getting as much experience as you can. Wins, losses do not determine how good of a gym you're at or how good you are. It's just about experience.
Yep. For
Get
sure.
in there and get as much waste the amateurs picking and choosing fights. It'll only come back to bite you.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. And again, people, as we said, we talked about it earlier. People will sometimes act like an amateur fight is the UFC championship, and it's like, no, you're fighting in a pub in a town that no one can pronounce, and everyone's going to forget about this in a week. But no, very good, Alfred. Thank you again, man. Wish you all the best, brother.